Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Um, I don't know how much further we've really got on this road. My guess is not very far because I just can't possibly see how this can be stretched any more thinly. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about. I want you to imagine, right? I want you to imagine a husband and a wife, and there is a paver in the driveway that is missing. And the wife is nagging at the husband to fix the paver in the driveway that's missing. And this goes on for a small amount of time. And then the radical feminist wife goes and hires someone else to replace the paver. And they place a paver in the driveway that is 2 shades different than the paver that was there. And then the next day, the husband arrives with the correct paver that he had been finding, only to find that now, instead of just replacing the paver, he has to now remove the replaced paver and then do the whole thing again. And it's cost some money because they've had to pay the professional, and there's tension. This is pretty much what the world has turned into. There is always a guy, a man, looking over your fence. No matter if you're married to whoever or you're with whoever, there is always some man doing it. Now, this doesn't necessarily just mean in the case of they want to, like, touch your wife or your girlfriend's tits. Sometimes they want her to pay you, like, do you get it? Because all of these jobs, except very, like, very certain professions, but even still, like most of them, and it depends on where you are, whether you're in a super urban environment or whether you're in the countryside. This is a very important ratio of how acceptable it is to contract out another man to complete your work. Now, the problem is that we're so far down shit creek without nary a paddle to be found. And we're so sloshing around in about 50 years worth of feminist progress that it's getting very difficult to know where the fucking driveway is, what paver is missing, because they're all now fucking replaced. And underneath the driveway is a series of thousands of husbands or boyfriends that have been buried under the driveway of the feminist progressive movement. Because the feminists didn't decide that, we're going to go through the thousands of years of training and perfection of not just the skills and services, but also of adjudication of when that's necessary, when that's appropriate, how to financially compensate for said work in an interact. No, it just became, well, if you don't fucking do it, I've got someone else who can do it. And that's basically what led to this. 1,000 million fucking times. Well, if you're not going to do it, and this is the greatest con because it includes parenting. It's like, well, if you're not going to do it, I'll find someone else to do it. And if you're not going to do it, I'll fucking turn you into a fucking piece of chattel property and you will be extracted from like a fucking bullock on a fucking wheel. But it's like, well, you're doing it the complete opposite way to what it says in my fucking Bible, in my history, in everything. Because, as I said, it's just a feminist, progressive fucking cult. And the problem is you get to this, it's like, are you a misogynist? I'm like, nope. because this has hurt women more than anyone. Half of children are women. And so just like if this was men doing this, and it is men doing it, it's men doing it on behalf of this, like all walks of life, from tradesmen to police to judiciary to bishops to everything. They have all been completely, in the West at least, completely unable to push back this torrent of feminist, radical, and it is radical. It's like, oh, shall we go from settling a small piece of land and building a barn over the course of our lives to completely inservituding ourselves in some type of chattel concentration camp? Oh, yes, that's radical. There is no greater thing than radical. Shall we go from protecting the image of mother and child and making it sacred to turning the mother into a whore and the child into a fucking stain on an abortion floor? Sorry for the thing, but it's like, it's not subtle. And see, the main thing is, this is the main problem, is that there is an expectation within feminist ideology that men would have been doing the exact same things they were doing if they weren't, looking after women and children and their community. And that's just not fucking true. It's not fucking true. Who was it that filled, obviously there's the dramatic theatre productions of like Les Mis or something like that, where there's this, oh my God, he was placed into convict servitude for stealing a loaf of bread to try and feed his children. But it's like, that's not the majority of the cases. It was the men specifically without children and without families. They were the ones that were causing all the fucking problem. And now, who is it that the women are breeding with? Those men. Because what has it become illegal to do? The only thing it's become illegal to do is to not do exactly what a woman says. That's what's now illegal. Because that is how the world worked through the lens of radical feminism. They're like, well, if you didn't do exactly as those men said, you would do. And it's like, that's just not fucking true. You couldn't have run a navy if that was true, because there would be mutinies. Like, there was strict discipline, all this stuff, because you're on this crazy floating whatever in the middle of the ocean, and people, and there's things like morale, there's things like discipline, like safety. It's no different to what a mine site is now, right? But you're there, but it's different when you're on a ship. So there was always discipline, but then there was freedom as well. So it's all through the lens of a false telling, and it's only benefiting those who have total control over their women, which we never did. If you take bog standard Islam now in the Middle East, in Pakistan, in wherever, in England, wherever the fuck it is, right? If you take that, it's still now in 2025, they have more control over their women than anyone 150 years ago did from the West. So the problem is, it's like there's a thing that a lot of people say about Islam and Muslim religion, is that they didn't have a cultural enlightenment, but they also didn't have a feminist movement. And we're not compiling all of this in to see how radically it is affecting us. Because what's going to happen? Well, we're just going to appease the women so that they self-destruct and weaken our entire fucking nations. And it's not. This is the problem and it's walled off at all points. You can't say that, because then you're like, well, women know. Women know. No, they fucking don't. They don't. Unless you've spent 10 years working in a fucking hierarchy of fucking construction and planning and infrastructure and resources and logistics, you don't know fucking shit. You will make bad decisions. You'll go, well, it's just a little bit different. What's the worst that could happen? Basically, that's the feminist revolution is what's the worst that could happen? And then like the combined voice of the last 1,000 years of Western civilization is basically that at all points is reinstated and reinstalled and re-given superiority, supremacy in dialect coming from that cohort of men is, oh, it will cause hell, all hell. Not what's the worst that could happen? All hell, almost immediately, if you change one fucking thing. But we're not just now in the territory of changing little things. Like, to give you an example, it's like you go and buy a brand new Mercedes-Benz, right? And your wife's like, let's just stick a wheelbarrow wheel on it instead of the correct rim size. What's the worst that could happen? That's still not even touching the actual reality of what has changed within our civic society, within our political discourse, within our religious discourse, within our societal norms and cultural restrictions. So apparently to free women, to liberate women from the evil men that were holding them down. But like saying, do you know what? Here's the best example, right? In Western Australia, in actually the whole of Australia, we have rules so that swimming pools have to be fenced off. Well, that is part of the evil patriarchy. It is a restrictive barrier to entry because we don't entrust children have the acquired knowledge or whatever to be able to swim. Right. Okay. But is that a good thing or a bad thing? Now, on a side note, it's like, why is there in residential private properties, where everything else is like, there's a knife drawer, there's a fucking drawer filled with pills, there's how many there's electrical sockets, everything else within a fucking residential property, right, has some guidelines, but not the same. It's not a barrier. It's not a fucking if you have a hole filled with water in the backyard, you have to have this fence and someone has to come out and look at it. Right. Well, what about if you have a radical feminist living in the fucking house? Do you know what I mean? So who was it that pushed forward for us to put fences around residential swimming pools? I don't know. Why don't natural waterways have fences around them? I don't know. Why don't residential areas that have kind of display ponds and things like that at their entrances and in their parks, why aren't they fenced off? I don't know. None of it fucking makes any sense. There used to be a little bit of Darwinism involved in humanity and society. You know what I mean? Like, as far as like, I'm pretty sure Victorian age, it's like, well, yes, the child drowned. Why? Because the mother was distracted on Tinder. But is that allowed to be said? No, of course not, because we're in fucking 2025. We're backstroking in fucking feminist abortion blood. And as long as we've got fences around our swimming pools, what's the worst that could happen? As long as we don't turn on the news and hear about children, falling out of windows and drowning in pools and, I don't know, running into highways in front of balls, there is nothing to shudder at. There's nothing immediate. The women are doing their fucking job. Because the combined, effect of what I'm seeing that's structurally wrong with our societies, that's going to take a good 10 to 15 years to really percolate up to the top. I'm seeing quite a lot of things about it now. We have a massive suicide epidemic. We have a massive drug and alcohol abuse epidemic. This is all what I've been told was my fault to do with the Aboriginal people my entire fucking life. Or we've exposed them to this. What about that? What about our people that were exposed to fucking hip hop and now think that they can run around like Snoop Dogg with a fucking gun and a fucking flag in their pocket And that's percolated all the way to the fucking grand final. No offense to Snoop Dogg, he's quite a fine musician, but it's kind of the wrong message. I don't remember Mozart or Wagner or anything like this having the same kind of mentality. That fucking nasty patriarchy. How dare they, elevate very complicated, grand movements of entire fucking, orchestra level performances. How dare they? Oh, holy shit. Do you know they didn't even have fences around their fucking swimming pools? What point do we start looking at the evidence? It's like if this was CSI Miami, right? And that guy, what's his name? Horatio, whatever, he pulls down his glasses, he'd be like, I think maybe the women caused Armageddon. And it's not on women, because now we're into like multi-generations of this. And they can't see, like I said, the different shade of or type of stone in the driveway. They can't see that. They can't, any of the problems that are emerging, they can't see them. They're completely blinded to it. But we don't have a convenient little optometrist store that you can take your wife to or your girlfriend to and go, yes, no, she's definitely blind as a fucking bat. She can't see any of these things, despite it being the elevated and protected culture of your culture. For hundreds and hundreds of years, she has been completely blinded, stricken, blind, deaf, dumb, and mute. Whatever the fuck it is. But it's everyone. And to talk about this, if you see it in your own children, well, you're not allowed to. You're just not allowed to. We're so far down the fucking track. So far. We're not just beginning. If you're my age, you're already in the second generation of this shit. And it all comes down to aesthetics. Basically, if something looked old, it was old. Because the new is always new. Except now the problem is all the things that I was told were new now look really fucking old and shit compared to the actual old things, which look fucking amazing. Because the fucking new things are just shortcuts. It's contracted, outsourced fucking facade of cultural fucking Marxism. I would rather live in a fucking tent than occupy one of these fucking abodes that I'm surrounded by right now. No one fucking asked permission to the local inhabitants to whether a fucking mass encampment of fucking indebted religious radicals could be fucking moved in and allow them to describe us as radical fucking whatever the fuck we were, colonists. You were colonizing at a level that is 1,000 times anything that the British Empire did. And you were disconnected, you were disassociated, you are completely off the fucking rails. With the only thing guiding you is novelty. So it's like, is it new? Does it look like Futurama? Then fucking all fucking steam ahead. Full steam ahead. But it's like, if you just work out some of the economics, like, I think, like most playgrounds, no shit, a little fucking playground in a park that's just a bit of cleared land with a couple of bits of fucking metal tube that are brightly coloured, basically sticky taped together. It's costing like $300,000, $400,000 fucking dollars. Because it's all fucking bullshit. There's this, and it's like you can't get to the core of it. Every conversation I've had with a government agency over the last 4 years of just like basically or open fucking season on me. That's what it's like. You may as well stuck a fucking tag on. You go and buy, like in America, you go and buy a tag for a fucking deer off the fucking shelf and then go for your fucking life. And no one from any of these institutions, whether it's child support or fucking ATO or any, you speak about like the basics of economics, the basics of like our past and our history of establishment of like settlements and property rights and these, and they have no idea what you're talking about because they've completely commercialized, industrialized debt. So that it's become a different thing. It's so much the norm that no one can fucking see it. And what it forces you to do is like, I can go back and I'm like, well, this is the way it was for thousands and thousands of years. This is what they were doing. This is what they were thinking. This is what they used to govern themselves and to as a guide for what they were doing. But you inevitably, because there has been, like, they've convinced such large proportions of Western civilization through the vector of women. So they've sold to women and then enforced on women because now they claim that an argument where you say, I don't agree with you to a woman is now tantamount to violence. So it's just a funnel. But then if you get to like, well, can we at least argue on this thing here, this phenomenon that's been happening for hundreds of years? Can we argue about the intricacies of this? No, I'm not doing that. Don't you know? And it basically just boils down to just mob rule. And it's just communism. It's like, we're not going into communism. We've been in communism. This is what it looks like. And this is where we're at. And I'm barely scratching the surface. If you could see the fucking hideous dungeon and the cesspit that collects all the fucking, the unacceptable fucking whatever manifestations that don't align with this mob culture, you'd be horrified. And it's all going to be very easy. I did it this morning. I took some photos of this is a museum in Tasmania of Port Arthur, right? Which is before the massacre, as you call it, it was known as a convict settlement. It's not a convict settlement. It's an actual settlement, like Fremantle, like Sydney, like Melbourne, like Hobart, like fucking London or Edinburgh. It's the same. There was a convict place there, and then something has stopped it. Dead in its tracks. More than likely, it was Port Arthur. I'm sorry, not Port Arthur. More than likely, it was World War I and World War II. Our energies were focused up towards Europe once again. So it was a place where people from Europe, it was a sorting place so that people in London could say, we don't like those people, send them down there, we'll sort them out, all right, and in the process, we'll build a fucking town. So yeah, there was a convict settlement there. But most of the stories about it, oh my God, Port Arthur, oh, it's the worst place on fucking earth. That's psychological to deal. It's part of the structure of the prison. It still exists today. Prisons were not supposed to be kind of like nice. In reality, a lot of people processed through those convict settlements actually ended up landholders all around Australia. Whether it's here, whether it's Fremantle, whether it's, the ones in wherever. A significant amount of our pioneering population started their journey as convicts. Why? More than likely because they were able to be separated from destructive family elements in Europe. That's why Australia was settled, because they went through that facility and then were freed. I even heard, I think it was the Hobart mayor, saying, or someone in the Tasmanian PR board for the disgrace of Tasmania's past, despite them being absolutely disgraceful now, and basically pushing people in wheelbarrows down to the fucking casino so they can extract their government money on pokie machines. But they were saying that when the convicts retired, that was the wording that was used. Because they're landing in this place where they're like, hang on a second, we were trying to use all these things, but they were convicts, so that's to like kind of arm the mentality of the people in Europe, the dispossessed of Ireland and England and Scotland, to kind of rally them up to our Republican aims that the Prime Minister is just so fucking publicly squashed right now. And good on him. The fuck are we talking about a republic? How about we actually work about getting the story straight? How about we dig through the fucking pile of fucking negative propaganda that's been piped into every student across this land for the last 100 years about our own past, about our own history? Every country town, every regional area in Australia is filled with families that were once convicts, now glorious participants in a glorious country of Australia. That was pretty well celebrated until about 15 years ago, when it started to take a little bit of a turn. Well, I think it's time to actually tell the truth about Australia right now in 2025. Yeah, with absolute royal decree license, I would like to dig into our infrastructure systems right now, including our prisons, our mental health facilities, our mental health funding, our women's whatever, refuge things, our abortion clinics. Let's actually dig in and find the picture, find the snapshot of Australia in 2025 under the Albanese Labor government. Maybe they can, maybe they can live stream over to the Mayans and ask them about how they dealt with their thing. But we don't know how the Mayans dealt with the fucking, what's it called? With the regret or the dismay that they felt perhaps after they'd all actively and cult-like participated in mass genocide and mass cultural degradation by fucking human sacrifice. It makes anything that was going on in Port Arthur look like a fucking Cub Scout camp. Those people left there with skills, relevant skills. If they played ball in the thing, they went on to be productive members of society. Because something that we knew back then that we don't know now is that removing the people from their negative environment was liberating them. That's why did they always have a Church of England right around the corner? Well, because that's the entire story of the Church of England. If you're born into some criminal fucking criminal family within London, in the squalor of fucking London back in the fucking 1800s, maybe you're an orphan or whatever, you've landed up somewhere, you were liberated through the lens of Australia. And that's a dual purpose story to the people in Europe, England, Britain, Ireland, Scotland, Wales. It was a hell on earth. It was, if you're bad, you go to Australia. And that was how we kept it, because it was an important story to tell in England. But that's not the actual truth of what happened to those people. Yes, if you're an absolute degenerate fucking criminal psychopath, you were probably treated a little bit worse then than you are now. But I'd actually, I'd beg to differ at that, because the amount of psychological torment, the amount of perceptual things that are inhabiting someone really mentally distressed mind in 2025 is kind of a lot more now. They might have been exposed to hideous fucking drugs, hideous violence, hideous displays of these things, like a kind of false concept of reality that doesn't really work in the physical world. Like there was kind of a comfort, like a familiarity to like hardship in the 1800s. Everyone was kind of 1 degree away, well, almost everyone was 1 degree away from hardship. Whereas now there's like a dissociated mess. It's like hardship is considered having to do an extra hours at fucking Chicken Treat. on your 4-hour shift. And some Karen, I don't know, fucking gives you a dirty look. Oh my God. That's 2 weeks of therapy right there now. But Australia was built by these individuals who, within the Christian mindset, were liberated and given a second chance in Australia. But what's happened is that it's caught up. See, Australia was a colony, so it used this process, and it did not tell the full story because it was a purpose structure. It was a structure with a purpose. It was to kind of take those people, take those elements, distribute the population of England, and then sort it out to make kind of two colonies. And then for the majority of Australian history, it was sending resources back to England so it could work as one big unit. So the people in England didn't know. All that ever heard is like, you might have heard your family member got sent down to fucking Australia because they were a criminal. It's like, you don't know what happened to them. You don't know that they're sitting on 400 acres out in the middle of the wheat belt, or 1,000 acres, or they built 6 bridges and they ended up being a fucking minister. You don't know any of this stuff because they were given a new start. So what the problem is now is that politicians in the last 60 years, that the world was changing, different fashions or styles were in fashion. So we needed to change it. So we needed to change Australia from not a place that you were sent if you were bad, but a place that you could buy into to get a start, which is very different. See, I would claim that the cost of coming to Australia as a convict is everything. It cost you your life. And that's why you were then given a new life in Australia. Now, what happened in the 60s and the 70s is that it cost $1. So it was cheap. It was almost free. And you could run away from your problems. And you could be granted access to a country with equal rights to someone that had been completely removed from theirs only, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 years previous. You could be second cousins. But you weren't forced to come on a convict ship. You weren't forced to build walls. You weren't forced to live in confinement. You weren't forced to pioneer one of the most, difficult landscapes. You weren't forced to participate in activities that could be described as genocide on the Aboriginal people. Even when you were given land, that's where yes, you had a new life, but it's like you had to pioneer that land with limited resources, and the scope was too large. The area size was so large that you weren't in community like had emerged in Europe or in England and Ireland and Scotland. You were all spread out. And so it did some strange things. But you were doing a pretty good job in the fuck all time that you'd actually been doing it. And then all of a sudden, you're swamped by the distant relatives that haven't had any of the hardships. None of them. And back in this day, like when we've been convicts, this could have been like basically, back in those times, if you were the first oldest son, you might have got the inheritance. Second son, I don't know, you give the business or something. If you're the fourth son of some Catholic, Irish, or Scottish family, there's not much left, you know what I mean, but crime. So that's who ended up here. And then all of a sudden, you've got the spoilt little brats, second cousins, third cousins, fourth generation, living on the fat of the land of Australia that was sent back. It's exactly like Ireland, but different than Ireland. Why do we still hold Ned Kelly up as an Australian hero? Because, this was the thing. This is what's going on. But what does my story do to this? Well, my story is very different because we weren't here as convicts. So it's even worse. It's like this is the reality that's happening. You can't remove aspects of the history that led to stability, that led to growth, that led to communion with the home base, and expect it still to work. The crimes, the famous thing about stealing a loaf of bread. It's like, yeah, yep. That doesn't tell me so much that it was a strict culture, but it tells me that there was a reason, right? If these people were absolute degenerate fucking whatever, then Australia wouldn't be what it is. But the crimes that we're splashing around now on the news almost every night, these crimes are far worse than anything, or than the majority of things that were sending people to Australia. And we don't have an Australia anymore to send people to. Because we've installed into our systems this so-called like humanitarianism. But it's devoid of suffering and hardship. And so it's blinded to these things. And the problem is it misinterprets the whole thing. It's like there was an understanding, if you were a convict being sent to Australia, that you were going to experience hardship. And so there was a story. But there was also clearly a story because there was people doing this, people building the thing. People were going out their sentences. Some of the sentences, or a lot of them, were like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, whatever the fuck it was. And then you were being liberated into Australia. Yeah, you're right. You're exactly right. Well, and it's instead of the church or God. So the government's just gone over the top of God. It's not the story. The story of Australia isn't, there is a fringe story of constant rebellion, but it's not the same as America. It's not the Wild West. It's not this full-out frontier land of constant that. It was kept in order. And the reason for this was because of those processing facilities, that because of this like humanitarian, liberal, modern, progressive outlook, we have to stick plaques on everything saying, oh, this is where convicts were treated very badly, despite the fact that if you go to every capital city of Australia right now, there are still convicts being treated horrifically, including Aboriginal people, and including families of those pioneers. At the worst case, with laws, governing their social media posts, which in most cases, in my case specifically, I was commenting on the degradation of Australia from a very unique and very appropriately, historically planted precedent. In other words, because of the longevity of my family's inhabitants on this place, I can speak about it. And who was undertaking this? Well, one of these families coming from parts of Europe that were basically, given a free trip, a free house, free lodging, and then full escalation to the very pinnacle of our society because it's gone communist. But it's not communist Australia because it's the dumping ground for fucking. It's basically, it turned into, rather than controlling it all, because of the press and the documentation, kind of condemning what the English did. The politicians of Australia didn't want to do that. The politicians of the UK, of Ireland, of wherever, didn't want to do that. So they just figured out a different way to do it. They go, oh, it only costs $10. Yeah, it's $10. You go to Australia, it's the promised land. Yeah, you'll get yourself a big house. Yeah, there's 30 years debt. But that's better than here. But it's like, well, fucking Ireland's like this big. And it's really old. England's this big and it's really old. So, of course, there's going to be a high concentration, high property values, all these things. And so what happened is people have come here in different ways. There's the waves of people that have invested in. They've been told a lie. They've been told it's all the same, that everything's going well. Australia is this, big wherever. And because of their progress, whether arbitrage or their, exchange rate, with like they kind of ghettoize themselves, and they're floating. So the new English are floating on this kind of double whammy. If you've come here with a bit of money, you're in this cohort of new English, so you feel entitled to own this country, despite the fact that you've come here in the fucking radically different conditions. And then you ghettoize yourself, the same as the Muslims and the fucking Jews and the fucking Indians. You do the same. And you have a view and a version of Australian history that everyone was a fucking criminal, despite the fact that most of your actions would be described as criminal behavior at the same period. So we're being swamped by the degradation of European culture, and we're the fucking lifeboat of European culture, and we're attempting to be genocided right now. There is no one more English than the families that came here and protected their Englishness. And the further disconnected you can get from our metropolitan regions, this is England. England doesn't live in fucking England anymore. Look at the royal family. They're fucking German. But I look to that family, I see, well, if you are German, if you are inhabiting, you are occupying this land, you have an imperative to protect that English culture because and they do a pretty good fucking job at it. So this is extending their scope. And it's no different than what all the liberal socialist governments around the world are trying to appear like they're doing with traditional cultures. Well, we have a traditional culture here. Dotted around Australia in these little communities, country communities, that have been rejected by the masses appearing in our capital cities with $10 in their pocket and a fucking Centrelink form already filled out. That's backwards. Oh, I don't want to go live out there with those backwards fucking people. What the fuck are we talking about? But this is the true telling. This is a true telling of the story of wherever you want to go, of Great Britain, the British Empire, of European history. I don't know. If you think of the migration of whatever Caucasian British people, like it kind of goes up from France, up to England, up to Scotland, and then it distributes majoritively out of that port in Plymouth that has a mountain that has my last name on it. And it's not hidden. It's like, oh, okay, my family had a mountain named after one of the fucking things in this place in Plymouth, which is where the Mayflower left to go to fucking America. And it's where whatever ships left to go to Australia, including Tasmania, they left from Devonport there, which is just a minute round the corner. And then the top of Tasmania is called Devonport. When I look at the area that I'm looking at buying in Tasmania, it's called Buckland. Why is it called Buckland? Because it's named after the Dean of Westminster. Okay. All the street names around there, they're England. That is England. Those are English settlers. This is like when you're watching like a History Channel version of these different films, like, around, say, Anglo-Saxons and the Normans and the Vikings and all this stuff, and playing all these elaborate, voyages and things and settlements and all this stuff on Great Britain. Well, what I'm speaking about, the place that I'm going to, is there. So I'm a diplomat that arrived in Van Diemen's Land. My family arrived there 180 years ago to take charge of the repurposing of convict labor into, citizens. So that was our job, was to turn criminals into citizens, and we did a fucking pretty good job of it. Obviously, the culture has changed, and that is an impediment. That's the invasion. And you have to basically stand on your head and try and do fucking cartwheels to actually explain how anything is going as planned or to plan or is going well, because it's not going well. If you stick to the basic fundamentals of the mindset of not the convicts, of the people came here to adjudicate and to like govern and to whatever of that convict and settler population, all those things are still there. Like everything's still there, but then there's just this fucking this projected capitalist, and it's not. You've got to call it like ultra capitalist. And basically, my argument is that, well, capitalism doesn't work in debt. So we have two periods of capitalism existing on the earth. We have the pre-debt capitalism, which is like there was debt, but the debt was concentrated to the top. And then most other people were freeholders or they were convicts. That's kind of a simplification. Like you're either, if you didn't have enough to buy land, you're a convict, or you were, indentured servant. And then if you did, you were a freeman or a freeholder of land. A landed gentry. So obviously there was if you say could only afford a small estate in England, then you could ship off to the new colony of Australia, then you could settle here and expand your influence. But that was a gamble because there was nothing fucking here. So all of this is still existing. But it's like, where is the cumulative contribution benefit scheme to the families of old, of Australia? Because we have been swamped by a new generation of people that are only existing here in the way that they are. And they're holding they're attempting to hold the frame of their superiority based on fucking astronomical figures of debt. It is a group delusion. If you have arrived here in the last 60 years from Europe and you are participating in this fucking delusion, you are fucking bonkers. You don't know how to farm. For the most part, you don't know how to actually contribute to this society, to this colony, to this settlement. Most of your debt is held offshore. Most of your resources and news and societal doctrine is being projected at you from offshore and from international entities, and you are contributing to like the negative reputation. And you've taken what was happening in the convict settlements, you've amplified it with new technologies, and you've made it into a fucking horror show. It's just that no one's telling the fucking story. You can turn on the History Channel and say, "Oh, those bloody Australians! Look at those convict settlements. Oh, look at what they did in slavery and this thing." That's you. But unlike previously, when it was like people with land, and this is the thing, your wealth was concentrated to land. So you were a lord or a duke or just a landholder in that system. And so everyone knew where the fuck you were. That's one of the most important things. So you were responsible. You knew. Say you decided that you didn't like some person, that you pushed them into convict settlements. Well, the convicts talked in there. That's always been the way that prisons have worked. So there was an emphasis through your church and through just the fact that you were a known person to contribute to the rehabilitation of prisoners, of people that have broken the law, because that person might end up working on your estate, or one of their cousins might end up working on their estate. You know what I mean? And although there was like an order and a kind of well-kept societal system of class, all it took is, one stray fucking arrow or a rock to the back of the head, or push someone down a fucking embankment, whatever the fuck it was. So because you were a landed individual, there was an emphasis on doing a good job. And I go back to the example about the driveway and the paver, because it was your fucking driveway. It was your communal fucking township. It was built by the individuals that had the land, the estates in the area. And what has this been whittled down to? Well, instead of having 6 families in an area, like if I go to Gingin, where I was, I'm very respectful of the families that have been there for 160, 170, 180 years. And it's very clear to see when you go there. That is who's there. It's still them there. So when I go there, if I bought land there and had my family there, it's like I'm a newcomer. I'm participating in their system, and I'm trying to I try and get my head around that first. And it's no different than when you watch Yellowstone, except it's Australian. So Yellowstone is through a pioneer frontier land lens, but Australia is not. And so right now in Australia, all across the whole place, we have this conflict arising from communities that have been very well kept. The same, half dozen families existing in the area, and their relatives, same kind of system. And then there's like a splattering of different decades projections onto that place, with a lot of them being bad. If you take anything basically from the fucking 1950s onwards, it looks like someone's fucking spewed up a fucking American fucking thing onto it. And it's gross. Because that was the culture. America grabbed the global culture. How did they do it? With projection of television and movies. And that's what we're recovering from right now. It's like every person, throughout the land has there's always this fantasy of finding some inheritance. You've got a rich, great uncle in Transylvania that's going to leave you this thing. Well, every single Australian has this inheritance. It's called Australia. We're inheriting like one of the most beautiful places that has been spewed on by American suburban fucking cowboy fucking culture via phone lines, via internet lines, via fucking, debt and Wall Street fucking manipulation. Say you're you're the person that the tire person or the tractor salesman in the wheat belt in fucking Kojonup or something, whatever the fuck it is in Australia. You have no choice. If Wall Street action wants to globally take markets and influence action on the land, it until now has had 100% effectiveness in doing that. So they didn't need to have Vietnam wars. They just had distributed Vietnam wars. And they didn't spray Agent Orange from Chinook Air Force and Army fucking helicopters. They just distributed it through our fucking shire system, through our local governments, through our universities to do the same thing. But the problem is, it's like that no one was in charge. It was all just self-interest. Self-interest became the charge. Why do we have a fucking astronomical amount of billionaires? In what currency are you a fucking billionaire if your refuge is hiding on a super yacht in the ocean, participating in fucking tax avoidance and hideous arbitrage fucking actions that is limiting Australia? So Australia now has the pinnacle of feminine fucking, display is to go and work on some fucking billionaires. Fuck that. That's nothing. That's costing our country fucking billions of dollars in tax revenue, and not to mention the cultural degradation that's causing on the other end. Because we've all been lulled into this fucking Instagram fucking stupor in which that person, as long as they tell a fucking, an acceptable version of their story, they don't tell the full story, obviously. They just tell the PG Disney version, in which they turn themselves, whoring themselves on a fucking boat to some fucking oligarchs, whatever, into a Cinderella story. There's a reason why Cinderella took place in a castle and not on a fucking super yacht. It's because it's immediately obvious that it's retarded. Everything that's going to look like progress is going to be slow and steady and reconnect to its roots that are already existing here, that have been overshadowed by fucking Uber Eats and Netflix. Because it will be underwhelming. You will get there, you will have all this thing, you whatever, it'll be amazing once you learn to see it properly, but no one's going to fucking care. Because people will always go to the fucking circus to see fucking bullshit. Right? But the problem is that the circus used to travel around so that you could put up with the circus in your town for maybe a week, and then you would fucking politely tell them all to fuck off, or we'll burn your fucking tents down, and they would leave. And that was the holy fucking union of fucking carnival bullshit that existed around the world. So what was the internet? The internet was the revolution of the circus. They still had the circuses to make sure that no one actually noticed that the whole world turned into a fucking circus. But nobody goes to actual circuses anymore because you just turn your fucking computer on or you open your phone and you'll see fucking 24/7 circus fucking time. In every fucking town, every fucking suburb, every village, every fucking city, every little borough in the entire fucking world is now a 24/7 fucking circus. And so we need to muster the strength. We need to re-establish our bonds set in stone across the fucking world and politely tell all these fucking carnies to fuck off, or we're going to burn their fucking tents down. It's pretty fucking simple. Each tiny little thing that's changed will have a ripple-on effect that will project well into your great-grandchildren's lives. And if you don't have a firm understanding of the actual firm traditions held in all our cultures, whether it's Irish, Scottish, English, Welsh, French, German, whatever the fuck it is, if you can't list those, 10 things that were held sacred in those times that I've seen in all settlements, in all regions, across the world, if you don't know what they are and you're floating on the hot air produced by the fucking liquid human waste fucking evaporating into the air from the global fucking circus, then you have no footing to speak of things like